whether you are here in the auditorium or the gymnasium in person, or here via the medium of television, radio, or the web. It's sadly rare in our society to have a serious conversation between people with opposing opinions on a sensitive issue. But that's our special opportunity and goal tonight. I'm Dr. Ed Welch, president of the University of Charleston. Many people have made tonight possible, including our major sponsor, the West Virginia Roundtable, and also Robinson and McElwee, Chesapeake Energy, the West Virginia Coal Association, and the West Virginia Land and Mineral Owners Association. I also want to thank many people who submitted questions that I will ask tonight. As moderator, I believe that it is my task to ask some challenging and direct questions because they are the questions that people are interested in and that they have submitted. And I will try to push the participants a bit to get beyond their talking points and into a thoughtful engagement with one another. There are 950 of us here with diverse views gathered in an auditorium on a college campus across the river from the capital of a state that is rich in energy-producing natural resources. The future of energy is vital to this state as well as to the people of this country and, of course, people around the world. Talking with me about the future of energy are Robert Kennedy Jr., the founder and president of Waterkeeper Alliance, an organization that works to protect waterways around the world, and Don Blankenship, the chairman and CEO of Massey Energy Company, Central Appalachia's largest coal producer. Thank you both for being here. Thanks to a coin toss, I know that the first question goes to Don Blankenship. And Don, as you think about the future of energy, what is your primary concern?
Well, I think it's hard to say one primary concern, but the two primary concerns have to be the security of the country and improving the quality of life both in this country and throughout the world. And when you're in the business, big business, you always have to have a mission statement. So I think the mission statement for coal is prosperity for this country and security. And to do that, we have to produce a lot of energy in this country, and we have to do it at a low cost, and we have to do it with the environment in mind, and we have to manage the resources we have to get the optimum use out of them. So all those things together, I think, fit into what energy policy in this country should all be about. Let me quickly say that before we go on that I wanted to thank Mr. Kennedy for lending his presence here tonight. You know, his name, of course, brings great attention to this debate, which we believe is an important debate. And also thank all of y'all for attending, as well as all the media for being present, because I think it is a very important issue, not only to the state of West Virginia, but to the country and to the world as to how we're going to provide the energy that everyone needs. And also want to thank all the people that have sent me emails wishing me well, and all the people who have expressed great concern and given me advice for this debate, as well as a lot of the churches and people who have sent emails expressing that they're praying for a good result tonight. So I wanted to be sure to thank all of them, as well as Dr. Welch for having this debate. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bobby, what would you say is your primary concern as you think about the future of energy for the country and the world?
Let me start by thanking you, thanking the University of Charleston for giving us the opportunity to have this debate, open discussion. Thank you, commending Mr. Blankenship, Don, if I can call you that, for engaging in this debate. I feel a strong connection to West Virginia. I come here, and I've come here for many years for recreational purposes to do the New and the Galley River. But most importantly, my family has a strong connection with this state. We were brought up understanding that John Kennedy would not have been president of the United States if it weren't for West Virginia. He launched his 1960 campaign in this auditorium in the state of West Virginia. And he spent time all over the state with my father, with my mother, with other members of our family, getting to know the people of West Virginia before his presidency and after his presidency. My father spent much time here across Appalachia. They love the people of West Virginia. They got a very close feeling, established a very close bond with them. But one of the things that my father always openly wondered about was how was it that this state, which had the richest natural resource perhaps of any state in the country, also had its poorest people, 49th in terms of the wealth of its people. And he understood the answer to that, which was an historical answer that in the 1890s to 1910, con men from out of this state came into southern West Virginia and swindled landowners across the state from the coal under their property, so that today 90% or more of the coal in West Virginia is owned by out-of-state interests, and those interests have been liquidating this state for cash. That process was aggravated 20 years ago with the growth of this new kind of very destructive coal mining, which is mountaintop removal. I've fought that kind of mining for many, many years. I've flown over the Cumberland. I've been all across central Appalachia. And I've seen something that I think if the American people could see it, there would be a revolution in this country. We are cutting down the Appalachian Mountains, these historic landscapes where Daniel Boone and Davy Crockett roamed, the oldest ecosystem in our country, a place where our culture is rooted. And we're doing it with these giant machines that cost hundreds of millions of dollars and that practically dispense with the need for human labor, which indeed is the point. When my father was fighting strip mining, which was much smaller back then in the 1960s, I recall a conversation that I had with him when I was 14 years old, where he said to me, they're not just destroying the environment, they're permanently impoverishing these communities because there's no way that they can ever reestablish an economy on these barren moonscapes that are left behind. And he said they're doing it so they can break the unions. And that's exactly what happened. The year I was born in 1954, there were 111,000 unionized mine workers in this state digging coal out of the tunnels in the ground. Today, there are fewer than 20,000 miners left in the state. They're taking more coal out of West Virginia than they were in 1954. The only difference is back then they were leaving at least some money in the state for salaries and pensions and reinvestment in the community. Today, virtually all of it goes out of state to the headquarters of the big coal companies and to Wall Street, places like Chase or JP Morgan Chase that finance these operations. And these companies are liquidating the state for cash using these giant machines and 2,500 tons of ammonium nitrate explosives they detonate every day. In the state of West Virginia, it's the equivalent of a Hiroshima bomb once a week. They're blowing the tops off the mountains to get at the coal seams beneath. Then they take the rock, debris, and rubble, and they plow it into the adjacent river valley. They have already flattened 1 million acres close to an area the size of Delaware. They've cut down 500 of the biggest mountains in West Virginia. They've buried, according to EPA, 2,000 miles of rivers and streams. It's all illegal. You cannot, in the United States of America, take rock and debris and rubble and dump it into a waterway without a Clean Water Act permit, and you can never get a Clean Water Act permit to do such a thing. So my friend Joe Lovett, who's sitting in the audience, one of the great attorneys in this state, brought a lawsuit in front of a conservative Republican West Virginia federal judge, Judge Charles Hayden, challenging the process, and Judge Hayden said the same thing I did. He said it's all illegal. It's been illegal since day one, and he enjoined all mountaintop mining. 2 days from when we got that decision, lobbyists from these big coal companies met with Gail Norton, who's now under federal indictment, with her first deputy chief, Stephen J. Griles, who's now serving a 10.5-month jail sentence in the federal penitentiary, but too late for the mountaintops. And he was a former lobbyist for the coal industry. And together they rewrote one word of the Clean Water Act, the definition of the word fill, to change 30 years of statutory interpretation to effectively overrule Judge Hayden's decision and to make it legal as it is today, kind of, to dump rock, debris, and rubble into waterways. And this is what, if I just finish this point, this is why I always say this, that what we're fighting here is not just the destruction, the massive and worst destruction of the environment that we've ever seen in the hemisphere. It's also the subversion of our democracy. It's the impoverishment of the American people. It is the destruction of the institutions of government that are supposed to ensure our quality of life, that are supposed to provide us participation in the political process. It's the corruption of public officials and even the press in this state and other states throughout that. All of the institutions that are key to a functioning democracy are under assault because of this industry, and it's American values that we are fighting for in this battle.
Okay. Please. The question I was going to ask is no longer appropriate. Don, I think you probably want to respond to some of those comments.
Well, it's typical of the environmental movement to use sensationalism, emotionalism, rhetoric, and untruths. The fact of the matter is there's hundreds of millions of dollars of payroll paid to people in this state, hundreds of millions of dollars of severance taxes, and that this state greatly benefits from the production of coal, not just people out of state. 99% of the electricity in this state comes from mining coal. The environmental stewardship in this state of the mining is second to none in the world. In 1980, this state was producing 150 million tons of coal. Australia was as well. Today, Australia produces 500 million tons of coal a year, and they're known as being great stewards of the environment. So it's a bunch of rhetoric. It's untrue. It's unfortunate someone would make those kind of accusations in our state, knowing that they're untrue and they can't be supported with facts.
Okay, please, folks. I politely ask you not to respond to what people say, otherwise you'll be interrupting all along, and I want them to be able to be free to say what they're really thinking and for us to absorb that on both sides. There are a number of issues that you have already raised. Let me give you a chance to respond by saying that when President Kennedy was in this state, he seemed to suggest that mining was important to West Virginia and mining was important to the United States. Would you disagree with him?
I don't disagree with him. I think that the situation has changed since then. I think that, first of all, we're here to talk about a very destructive kind of mining that actually hurts job production in this state. A mountaintop removal mine uses about between 24 and 32% less, fewer miners to produce a ton of coal. So if we went back to underground mining, we'd be producing, we could produce the same amount of coal, but we'd use more human beings, and more of that money would be left in the state of West Virginia, and there'd be more employment. I want to respond.
Let's deal with that if we can. Take one
let me
at a
just
time.
respond to what Mr. Blankenship said about this coal severance taxes and the other payments and the economic benefits that the coal industry brings to the state. And this is something that the coal industry often claims, that there's a couple $100 million worth of severance taxes every year. There's other benefits and employment, property taxes, and other benefits from the coal industry. The Massey, which is associated with the University of Kentucky and the Kentucky State Legislature, just did a study on the cost of coal, of the coal industry, to the state of Kentucky. The authors have said that those facts are also applicable here in West Virginia. What they found, just isolating the Kentucky state budget, that the cost of hosting coal in the state, although it brings benefits, that the cost exceeds those benefits by $115 million a year. An additional study by Hendricks, which was just released, and that is a peer-reviewed study, shows that the healthcare costs of coal on the people of this state, the coal industry brings $8 billion a year to Central Appalachia, but the healthcare costs are $40 billion a year. So they exceed the benefits by hosting the industry, exceeds those benefits by 5 times. And of course, that's much aggravated by mountaintop removal. We're not going to get rid of all mining in this state, and I'm not advocating it. I am advocating that we immediately get rid of all mountaintop removal mining so that we can bring more employment to the state, we can bring responsible growth to the state, and the state needs to start diversifying, and it needs to start bringing new kinds of industry and transitioning to a new energy economy, or as Senator Byrd recently pointed out, this state is going to be left in the 19th century, and that's not going to be good for West Virginia. Mountaintop removal mining is incompatible with any other kind of economic growth. No industry is going to go to Mingo County or Logan County and endure the coal trucks, the overloaded coal trucks on the road, the coal dust, the bad air, the contaminated water, the slurry ponds, all of the other things that go along with mountaintop, the explosions, the dust. all of those things. Nobody's going to know. People are flocking now to Greenbrier County because there's no coal there.
Okay. We do have a light in front of us for those of you in the audience to try to ensure that we move the conversation on and have some equity. There are a couple of issues that I think that come up. Well, I was going to suggest a couple of those issues, and one that I've heard in the questions that have been submitted to us. One is that the claim that coal mining is an economic benefit when you are employing fewer and fewer people. And another thing that folks have noted is that many coal mining states and counties are relatively poor. And so how do you respond to the issues about the economic benefits?
I want to go first of all to all these theories that people have and all these studies that go on, but the truth of the matter is the state of Kentucky has about $1 billion underfunded budget because of the problems with coal in Kentucky, and they know how important it is. The West Virginia governor and the West Virginia legislature are very concerned because of the drop in coal. So if all these studies were accurate, why is it that we would have such budget deficits in these states as we see declining coal production? And again, there's so much rhetoric, it's hard to deal with it all in these types of conversations, but every industry in the world that has survived the difficulties of business competition has mechanized. The coal industry is no different. And the coal industry, when it mechanized and went to continuous miners and drag lines and inloaders and so forth and away from manual labor, had to buy equipment. Unfortunately, the laws in West Virginia are so difficult for businesses and the lawsuits so common and the cost of doing business so high that nearly all the machines that we buy are produced outside the state. So the employment that goes into making those machines and making much of the material that we buy may be in Alabama, which is a right-to-work state, or Virginia, or Kentucky, or Pennsylvania. But it's no different than farming. It's not done with plows anymore. It's done with tractors and harvesters. No different than any other industry. But to force the coal business out of West Virginia or surface mining would be a huge mistake for household budgets. It'd be a huge mistake for the industry in this country. It'd be a huge mistake for our homeland security. And let me back up and say, it's easy to sit and criticize a company. But Massey is made up of 6,000 individuals that live and work in Appalachia. The coal industry is made up of perhaps 40 to 46,000. These people are your brothers, your sisters, your mothers and fathers, your children and your grandchildren. And the generations that came before that worked hard to make this industry great. And this industry is what made this country great. If we forget that, we're going to have to learn to speak Chinese.
Bobby, doesn't mechanization make coal mining safer on the one hand and also keep down the cost of energy, and aren't those good things?
Well, if you're asking whether it's good for West Virginia, my answer to that is no. It's not good for West Virginia to have fewer employees when the companies that are producing the coal and the people who own the coal live out of the state of West Virginia, because it means all the money's going out of the state. This, Don often talks about his concern for the workers of this state, but this is an industry that, through a ruthless pursuit of total efficiency, has eliminated 90,000 jobs, 90% of its workforce since I was born. And Don himself, when he who talks often about his concern for the workers, when at the Mammoth plant, I think there was 230 workers there at Mammoth who were union members. He bought the mine, he shut it down so he could fire the union members. Then, while those union members were looking for jobs back in the mine when he reopened it, instead of hiring them, he went out of state to advertising in papers in Atlanta, in Myrtle Beach, all over South Carolina, in USA Today, to find out-of-state workers to come in here and take those jobs from West Virginians, because he didn't want to hire people who had the union culture of West Virginia. Now, Don himself, last year, had an overall cut in all of his employees' pay of 6%, and recently, according to AP, he gave himself a raise of $15 million. So this is an industry that oftentimes, when environmentalists come along, will cry these crocodile tears and say, oh, what are we going to do with all the miners? And my answer to that is, what did you do with the 90,000 miners that you fired or laid off over the past 40 years, and all the miners that you're struggling, if it was up to this industry, they'd get rid of every single miner and their employee and do the whole thing with machines that are built out of state. And that's not something that's good for West Virginia.
Don, the money is going out of state, and jobs are going out of state. Is that accurate?
No, I tell you, if it wasn't so serious, it would be humorous, wouldn't it? Ruthless pursuit. Mammoth, I mean, we bought Mammoth out of bankruptcy. The mine had been operated by previous operators and gone bankrupt because it was mismanaged. We're paid to manage. That's the way I get paid to manage. We've bought many mines that have gone bankrupt and left behind the reclamation liability and took that operation and reclaimed it and fixed the issues that were there. Mr. Kennedy talks about out-of-state employment while he comes here from Massachusetts or wherever to tell us what we ought to be doing. Again, the problem we've got is that we have people that don't know facts, that have bully pulpits like Mr. Kennedy has because of his wealth, that can espouse opinions without the discomfort of any facts. And it's a real problem. And if we don't begin to deal with the facts, we're going to get the wrong answer, because the one thing that's fundamental to having good energy policy, a strong economy, humanitarian behavior is first to know the facts. And the facts that are espoused are simply not facts.
Okay, let me push a couple of specific issues that have come out of the questions that have come to me. And one of them is a rather candid question that says, frequently the issue about coal is framed as a battle between corporate greed on the one hand and trying to make more money, and the environment and human health on the other hand. How would you attempt to reshape that person's or those individuals' perception of coal?
The only thing I can tell you is that the health and longevity, life expectancy in this country is very good compared to the rest of the world. It's very good compared to the parts of the world that don't have electricity or energy. Life expectancy in Angola is about 39 years. They're not too concerned about global warming in 2020, 2050, or 2100. The health and well-being of people greatly depends on the quality of life that they're able to have. That quality of life is greatly dependent on electricity, affordable electricity. Affordable electricity in this world is greatly dependent on coal. There's no country that mines coal more safely and more environmentally soundly or consciously than this country does, and no company within this country that does better at that than Massey. Again, when you criticize what we do as an industry, Massey or the coal industry, you're criticizing the people that are teaching your Sunday schools, that are teaching, coaching your Little League, the people that are in the communities of West Virginia. And to characterize those people as evil and wanting to destroy their own environment makes no sense at all. We're in a situation where we talk about health. If you want to talk about health, go to India and look at health. You know, watch the Slumdog Millionaire if you want to see what India looks like without having adequate coal supply to give electricity to 420 million people. So we shouldn't come in here and talk about humanitarian behavior or health when 1.6 billion people of the world live without electricity and live on $1 a day, and tens of millions of people die of hunger and starvation and preventable disease, while we're trying to talk about whether we've got one more part per million in a water discharge off of a surface mine. It's so out of touch with reality that it's hard to have a conversation about it.
Bobby, do you think it is possible to mine coal in a way that is safe, that's healthy, and is environmentally compatible?
Well, look, let me say this. First of all, industrial growth, prosperity is not dependent on coal in this country. We have a lot of other alternatives. We have the best energy resource of any nation in the world. We have the finest wind resources on Earth. We now employ, as of 2008, more people in the wind industry than we do as coal miners in this country. Last year, we built more wind energy installations than we did all of coal and all of gas combined. We have we're second, number 2 in solar energy in the world. We have the best gas in the world. We found in this country over the past 2 years 1,000 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. We have it's as cheap as coal. We have existing today 450 gigawatts of generating capacity for natural gas. We only have 320 gigawatts for coal. So And the coal plants are used 95% of the time. The gas plants are only used 62% of the time, not 38% of the time. That means they're idle 62% of the time. We can have the same energy in this country, the same employment, by shifting our priorities. I'm not saying that West Virginia should abandon underground mining. I think it's important for our country, and it's important for the state for the moment while we transition. I want to answer this question about quality of life because I agree with Don that you have to look at the entire environment, not just the fishes and the birds, but you look at the way that people are living in this state. The Hendricks study shows that the closer you live to a coal mine, the sicker you are, that the morbidity and mortality in this state, if you live near one of those mines, whether you're a man, a woman, or children, you have a whole range of illnesses that you're now subjected to. I know people in this part of the room, a woman, Judy Bonds, a little boy lives in Marsh Fork who goes to sleep every night with his clothes on because he's terrified that that 920-foot berm that's right above his house, filled with 8 billion gallons of toxic slurry, are going to collapse on him the way that the Massey's Martin County slurry pond collapsed, something that Don said could never happen, and then afterwards said was an act of God. But that little boy lives in terror. He's watching the dust come up every day and breathing it. His water supply has been poisoned, and this is not a high quality of life. Now, he says I'm from Massachusetts, which is not the way that you pronounce the word, and I'm actually.
Don't you wish quickly could have spelled it right?
I'm wondering if you did that deliberately, but I live in New York. My father was senator from New York, incidentally. But in New York, all the waterways in New York, the fish are now unsafe to eat because of mercury contamination coming from coal plants. In our country, every single waterway in our country is now contaminated with dangerous levels of mercury. According to CDC, 1 out of every 6 American women now has so much mercury in her womb that her children are at risk for a grim inventory of diseases: autism, blindness, mental retardation, heart, liver, and kidney disease. There are, according to CDC, 640,000 children born in this country every year who've been exposed to dangerous levels of mercury in their mother's wombs. All of that's coming, or 70%, from coal-burning power plants. I have 3 sons who have asthma. And they get asthma from ozone and particulates, which is the most common cause of trigger for asthma attacks in this country. According to CDC's own website, a Harvard Public Health study, there are 60,000 Americans who die every year from breathing ozone and particulates from coal-burning power plants. 1 million lost workdays, 1 million asthma attacks. In the Adirondacks, where I take my kids fishing and hunting and hiking and swimming, 1/5 of the lakes are sterilized from acid rain. And any of you who's hiked on the Appalachian Trail, along the Blue Ridge Trail, and gone up in those higher ridges, you can see the Appalachian woodlands have been destroyed now from Georgia all the way up into northern Quebec from acid rain from those plants. This is to say nothing of the carbon. But these are the true costs of coal. When Don says, well, coal is cheap, he's talking about the electric bills that the people pay. But the true price of coal, if we lived in a true capitalist system, which I believe in, we should have free market capitalism in this country. In a true free market system, the price of a product would reflect all of its costs. A producer like Mr. Blankenship would have to pay all of the costs of his product before in order to get it to market, instead of forcing you and I and my children to pay through bad health by externalizing those costs. Okay. And all of us, we were supposed to have learned the lesson in kindergarten that we're supposed to clean up after ourselves. And this industry has not learned that lesson yet.
Is it possible to mine coal in a way that is healthy for individuals and is environmentally compatible?
As I'm saying now, I think that we have a lot of work to do to figure out not only how to mine it, and I think the mining is much easier, but clearly mountaintop removal mining there's no way that can be made compatible with human communities, with sustainable communities, with prosperity, with independence, with all of the values that we care about. You cannot cut down the mountains, the purple mountains majesty of the United States of America, the home of our culture. You cannot do that, and you cannot destroy streams and rivers and the oldest ecosystem on earth and say that this is somehow sustainable or good for our country. The big challenge I think that we have is really on the other end of how do we burn coal in a way that is economic, where it can compete in a marketplace against much more efficient producers. And that's what I would challenge you to tell me how you're going to do that. How do you compete in a free market system? You know, you claim to be a free market advocate of free market capitalism.
We'll give him an opportunity to answer that in a few seconds, so I'll let you